The content contained in this podcast are the opinions and beliefs of individual conservative students at the George Washington University, and these opinions are not necessarily supported by GW Young America's Foundation.
Hi, so I'm Ted, and this is the YAFCast, and today we're going to be talking about free speech on campus. Hi, my name's Ted, and I've been on the YAF board now for about 3 years. It's been a pretty good time, and this is one of the first times we're actually trying one of this sort of podcasts. We're trying to get it up and running, and today we have on AJ Link. AJ, you want to talk about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Like Ted said, I'm AJ. I'm currently a law student at GW. In my official capacity, I guess, with the legislation we're talking about, I am a law senator to the Student Association. I also chair the Student Life Committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Assembly.
So what does that entail? Like, what would a normal, what are you normally doing throughout the week for those committees?
So it kind of just depends. We have regular meetings. The Diversity and Inclusion Assembly is new this year. We've been trying to have listening sessions to kind of feel what's going on around campus from marginalized groups. Mm-hmm. In the Student Life Committee, we have a pretty broad mandate in terms of the essay. We deal with anything that the Finance Committee doesn't deal with in terms of allocating money to orgs, or the Academic Affairs Committee doesn't do. And then we can partner with them whenever. So kind of whatever goes on campus, I'm technically supposed to at least be aware of in some capacity, which is an outrageous thing.
I have to say that's probably a little difficult. A lot goes on.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about the legislation. I don't want to skip ahead, but as soon as the Hatchet posted the article, there were all these people saying, "What about this? What about this? What about this?" I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not omniscient, but I try to be. But yeah.
So so the Hatchet brought up that piece. If you want to talk a little bit about it, how you responded to it, what the piece necessarily was like.
Yeah. So just to get back on the process, YAF. I hope they're okay with me saying this is a bit of a provocateur type of organization. I think that's part of their brand, which, for better or worse, that's who they are.
Fair enough.
But unfortunately, I personally believe that being on a liberal campus, YAF faces things that not every organization goes through. And recently they had an incident where I think it was 2 or 3 times that they had to repost an event. Mm-hmm. And it caught my eye because they were using essay resources to print all this shit out. And we're supposed to be a sustainable school, allegedly.
I think it's 2,000 pieces of paper or something like that. Something ridiculous.
In the past week, past 2 months, not past week, past 2 months, were roughly 2,000. And then over the past 2 or 3 years, 5,000 pieces of paper, which is outrageous. And I can totally understand the people who are against the wording on the posters, mm-hmm. Who may have found that offensive, derogatory, whatever. But honestly, just tearing down the posters is wrong. And I was like, well, I want to do something about it, because since I've been in the essay, I've noticed that conservative students on campus feel like the essay doesn't fight for them and doesn't acknowledge their existence. They often feel like they're silenced. So I've made it a personal goal this year to make sure that conservative students feel like they're co-equal parts of the GW community. That includes funding the Ben Shapiro event. That includes funding the Mia Love event that happened a couple weeks ago.
Right, I think the college Republicans put that on.
Yeah. So with the legislation, I wanted the essay to take a stand that says, hey, even if you don't like YAF, even if you don't like their views, we need to stick up for this community because they're facing vandalism issues. And it's not just the posters, right? It's the Cemetery to the Innocents.
Cemetery of the Innocents, yeah.
Where that was destroyed last year.
Yeah, that was brutalized.
There's so many things going on, and it's not. And to be fair, it's not just YAF, because the pre-law association had another type of display that was messed up. SJP had the symbolic wall last year that was pushed over.
Right.
There's tons of things that are going on, but I just felt like it got to a point where the essay needed to make a stand for conservative students.
So the way that I've seen it being on YAF for the last 3 years is that every time we do an event, we expect to have some sort of backlash just because that's how it is, and people obviously don't like it. We've had people protest our events. Last year during Cemetery of the Innocents, people were coming over and pulling our crosses out of the ground. And eventually people wanted to have a demonstration on top of it, to which I and a couple other members had to go up to them and say, you can demonstrate in front of, but you please do not demonstrate on top of. So things like that are pretty par for the course from what I've seen, and I just want to say I appreciate the fact that you, as an SA senator, have acknowledged that this is something that we regularly face in terms of people are allowed to protest, people are allowed to be upset.
For sure.
Absolutely.
I strongly encourage protest. I mean,
exactly.
Direct action is one of the best things you can do, but
when
at a university that has rights and responsibilities, that has a code of conduct,
right,
there are certain things that you can't do, and I think when you violate the responsibilities that you're charged with as a student at this university, you should be held accountable no matter who you are.
And so let's talk a little bit about the legislation itself. So take me through the process of formation of a thought towards formation of a bill towards passage, because I like to watch the live streams, but I don't necessarily understand all that's going on. So if you could take me through that process. What's that like?
I think the bill to get to the floor took about 2 weeks. There was a little exchange between one of the YAFCO presidents and I, and then Senator Corsi and I, and then it was kind of just researching the events, trying to find good sources, going through the code of conduct, seeing what was allowed, what's not allowed, and then once I had that, I submitted an original bill, and it had to go through Student Life Committee, which I chair. And then in Student Life, there was a bit of a discussion about, this doesn't only happen to YAF, and I was like, I completely understand that, but you have to understand that it mostly happens to YAF,
Right.
And then after it passed through Student Life, there was some more discussion about how we should be a bit more inclusive, which I'm totally cool with. My original thought was kind of narrow-sighted, and I can take that criticism, and I think that we shouldn't just be protecting YAF's speech, we should be protecting every organization's speech.
Right.
So I took that criticism, we made some changes before we got to the floor, and we submitted those changes.
Right.
And then on the floor, there was just the general discussion about, should we make this a YAF bill, or should we make this not about YAF and about everyone?
Right, I remember that discussion happening.
And I think it's a fair discussion to have, but my personal view was, we can make it about everyone, but if we're citing specific instances, for better or worse, the instances mostly happen to YAF, so that's going to be the substance of what we're fighting against.
Right.
And I don't know if I made it clear on the floor, but the bill wasn't in support of YAF. No offense to the members of YAF. It wasn't in support of YAF and their views. It was protecting students at GW who happen to be members of YAF.
And just to speak on YAF's behalf for just a second, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't want legislation passed on our behalf or endorsing our views, because that's just the problem that we face on the other side too. We see a lot of this legislation that's passed on behalf of liberal views blatantly, and we say, well, we'd appreciate if you just passed it free speech for everybody. That is one of our cores, is we don't necessarily just want free speech for us, we want free speech for everybody. So you don't have to apologize for saying it wasn't on behalf of YAF.
Well, I mean, and I think the SA has to strike a balance, as seen with the aftermath of this, where other organizations and other people are coming forward saying, hey, you're not sticking up for us, hey, you're not doing this. And personally, I'm happy to say, hey, if you want to work with me, I will do the best that I can. I feel like in my capacity as the chair of the Student Life Committee and as the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Assembly, it is my duty to fight for every single student on this campus, no matter what their views are. For better or worse, it's kind of my responsibility, I guess. So, in terms of the discussion on the floor, which if you were there or watched the live stream, you heard, I think personally a lot of it simply had to do with the fact that we were standing up for what was happening to members of YAF and their posters. I think a lot of people, because of the provocative nature of YAF and because of some of the wording that YAF uses, feel like YAF shouldn't be protected the same way. And if people want to have the discussion, that's fine, but I don't think that's a discussion that should have been pertinent to the legislation I brought to the floor.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the Student Code of Conduct, if you feel offended or threatened by any sort of postering or by any campus association, there is a way to go about it, isn't there?
Right. So there's the CSE, the Center for Student Engagement, has their own postering policy, but you can also file complaints through the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Community Engagement, or ODECE. So there are multiple avenues, which we include in the bill. I didn't originally have that, and luckily there was a center that caught it and was like, hey, we should tell people that you can go this way instead of resorting to vandalism, which I thought was a great idea, so we included it. And again, like that was just something that I missed. But yeah, there are other avenues to say, hey, we don't like what a YAF poster is saying, or we don't like what a YDSA poster is saying, or we don't like what any organization's poster is saying. There are avenues where you can submit a complaint, and administrators can determine whether or not that poster is okay.
So you said the main complaint was that it was a YAF. The YAF was mentioned in the bill. Is that sort of most of the flack that you got?
Well, so yeah, and part of it's my fault. So when I started out the legislation, I had it titled just YAF resolution in my Google Drive because it was just the easiest way to get it started to save it.
Okay.
And then as it evolved, it turned into the Free Speech Protection Act or something like that. But they still had the title as the YAF resolution. But so that was just a miscommunication. But then obviously in the meat of the bill, a lot of the whereas clauses were instances where YAF posters were ripped down, or the number of times YAF had to request printing, or something that happened to YAF. And then there are a few whereas clauses about other organizations and quotes from administrators. But yeah, from my position, the essay often cites specific orgs to show that they're in favor of them or against them. So for me, whether it was just a YAF bill or was an all-inclusive bill that had a lot of YAF components, it didn't matter to me. The substance was the same no matter what.
Have you gotten any personal flack for what you've done, like from people that you know or people that you thought you knew or stuff like that, just because of what you've done? Or has most of your friend base or people that you know been pretty supportive of you?
I don't think there has been overwhelming criticism or support of me individually.
All right. Well, I just noticed that you and George Glass have both been getting like some stuff on like Overheard and stuff like that from what I've seen, but
yeah, I haven't seen on the Overheard page. I guess I should check it, but
or not you specifically, but like about the text of the bill and stuff like that.
Yeah, if someone wants to criticize me, they're welcome to email me. My email's available on the essay website. I mean, I'm open to it. I'm not afraid of it. I said on the floor that this is something that I'm standing up for, and I have no problem doing it. If someone has an issue with that or thinks that I'm not doing enough, like was brought up on the Senate floor that I wasn't doing enough for other groups, I welcome that criticism. If you have an issue, please come to me, and I'll do my best. But I haven't. No, I mean, being in the essay, people are generally just gonna shit on you. I mean, for better or worse, that's just what happens, right? And a lot of people don't understand the work that we do or don't care unless it affects them, and then they're happy or they're disappointed. But no, if someone wants to criticize me or congratulate me, they're more than welcome to. I'll take it in stride.
Well, I appreciate that. So that's good to hear that you haven't gotten too much directly from anybody. Just moving on to sort of free speech at large on campus, how do you feel being an essay senator is in charge of essentially gauging student life at all times, which is a ridiculous thing to be charged with? How do you feel free speech in general or speech in general on campus is treated? It would be a conservative, liberal, or not even political, just about certain topics.
Being an older grad student, so I took time off before I went back to law school. I guess I'm part of the older generation who sees a lot of things as just like bitching and complaining. I like having arguments. I like being combative. I like exchanging ideas. If your ideas are better, prove it. I mean, it's really that simple to me. And when people complain about YAF speech, or conservative students complain about liberal speech on campus, it's like, if your ideas are better, prove it. I welcome discussion. I personally, as diversity and inclusion chair, wanted to have more debates and more substance, but there were things like table talk and campus couches that were doing it, and up until this year there was a conservative liberal
I was going to ask you about that.
That isn't getting funded, which is crazy to me. But yeah, I would love it. I would love to foster more appropriate political debate on campus. I know there's a movement in terms of deplatforming bad ideas, which I think is I think it can be successful, but in terms of deplatforming, you shouldn't be deplatforming other students, at least not to my eyes. Like, if you're not inviting, say, Milo, I'm cool with that. But if you're not letting a fellow student speak, I'm not cool with that. I think there's a distinction there somewhere. And I think everyone should be able to say, as long as it's within the student code of conduct,
right,
whatever the fuck they want.
Okay. And sort of going off that a little bit, so free speech on campus, you say just kind of let the discussion happen is the main point. And
yeah, I mean, you don't want to allow hate speech or extremely incendiary speech to ferment on campus.
Which I think we can all agree on, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want things leading to violence or physical confrontation, and you don't want people openly discriminating against. And for the people who feel like YAF does that, I think you should challenge YAF in a debate. I think you should file, whatever appropriate measure it is, and let someone else decide whether or not, just to use YAF as an example, YAF is being discriminatory. If you think a YAF poster is discriminatory or violating some type of right or concern of yours as a student, then tell someone who has the power to decide. Right? So it's that easy, right?
And we welcome that. I mean, even just yesterday, we had an event called Ask YAF.
I was there for a few minutes. I stopped by.
What was your opinion of it?
I didn't get a lot out of it because it was the part of the event, and I guess I'm saying a part, maybe it was the entire event, where some guy was asking a question, not allowing a follow up, and then calling someone a hack.
That happens a lot. Yeah.
And regardless of how you feel about YAF's views, because I disagree with a lot of YAF's views personally, but it's not my place to say that they can't share views I disagree with. I don't think that's any student's place. And I also think it's wrong to go to an event like that to try to belittle YAF instead of hearing where they're coming from. And I know we're kind of getting close to time. A good example is how YAF members feel about abortion, right? So YAF is clearly against abortion, right? But a lot of people think that means YAF is against women or women's power and things like that. But if you talk to a YAF member, most YAF members are for providing affordable contraceptive to stop pregnancies.
Right.
YAF is for providing solutions that stop abortions from having to take place. They're not trying to ban contraception. They're not trying to ban sex. They're not trying to ban everything and abortion. It's just abortion. So I think there is middle ground there. I personally am for abortion, but there's middle ground where we can both agree that people should be getting cheap contraception and there's a middle ground where you can meet.
And that's really the entire point of why we have events like yesterday, because we get misrepresented all the time. YAF is against all immigrants. I mean, we have people on their board who are immigrants themselves and or sons of immigrants or daughters of immigrants. We get misrepresented a lot, and so we enjoy that whole come tell us why you hate us. We want to talk to you. We want to be that sort of force to say this is what we represent, and we'll explain it, we'll debate it. We enjoy that free speech. The problem that I see and the problem that other YAF members see and obviously you've seen is when that debate isn't happening, but instead it's the shutdown of discourse.
Yeah, it devolves into shit throwing.
Yeah, completely.
I don't think we should have that at GW.
And so I appreciate you coming on this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate the work you've done on the essay, and I hope you the best with reading week in your finals.
Thank you. I think that's one of the few times someone said they appreciate the work I do in the essay. So I will not note that. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.